What's up everybody, Sunkist here, and in today's video we're going to be going over the patch notes that just came out that are going to be added to the PTS and will show up in a future update. There's a new fishing feature in questline, and there's a ton of changes to legendary perks, weapons, and that sort of stuff. So I'll just quickly start by briefly mentioning that we will have the ability to fish in the future. There's going to be different bait types of different rarity, which will help you catch, certain fish easier or harder depending on what sort of bait you have. And there's also obviously going to be common or more rare fishes. It will also be affected by weather and time of day, I believe. So there's going to be some variability on where you go fishing, what's the weather when you're fishing. I do believe if you nuke an area too, that can change the sort of fish that you spawn, but that's going to be how that works. So starting with some gameplay mechanics that are being changed, pretty much going to change how limb damage and crippling works. I don't believe that stuff will have the chance to cripple anymore. It will just rather just do limb damage. So less instantly crippling limbs with, when you have a high chance to do that, and more so just whittling away at, limbs health. So I think that'll be more consistent. Not exactly sure how that will play out in terms of in practice, but as you can see, a bunch of the perks that affect limb damage are just kind of reworking the way that they're being calculated. Some of the values are being tweaked, but nothing too crazy, for any of these here. I guess one notable thing is that Tormentor is going to be moved from luck into the perception tree. Again, this is all just limb damage related changes, nothing too crazy. You're still going to be able to cripple enemies' limbs with, with stuff. So it also looks like they are removing immune. And there are some enemies that are immune to crippling, so I guess they're getting rid of that now. So that'll be pretty nice. But kind of what I wanted to get into here, the meat and potatoes, is going to be the perk balancing, because there's a ton of changes here. So nothing too crazy, but Slow Metabolizer is going to essentially be a little bit more effective now and keep with the theme of not having as many points needed to be allocated for perk cards. So that's going to be 2 ranks instead of 3. That seems like a really common theme that they're kind of just doing with all the perk cards now, which I'm a huge fan of. So awesome there. Also Dromedary, all drinks. Yep, so that's same thing, just reducing the ranks there. Now Hydrofix is interesting. I don't know if this is how it works now, but I thought Hydrofix just reduced how much hunger or thirst you lose from taking chems, but now it looks like it's going to be actually restoring thirst, and a similar thing with munchie resistance. So that's kind of cool. That's really helpful for people that are running overeaters as a human character. You don't have to worry about, taking chems, moving down your hunger and thirst meter. All right, what else we got here? Chem Fiend. Any chems you take last 100% longer. Point cost reduced, increase from 1 to 2. Oh, okay, that's really nice. So essentially, Chem Fiend right now, rank 3, gets you the 100% longer duration on chems. Essentially, they're removing rank 1 and 3, keeping rank 2, and making that be the 100% one. So that's nice. It frees up an extra perk point there. Definitely like running that for my Ghoul character, especially for Berry Mentats, to keep those extra intelligence active for as long as possible. Now this is a huge one right here. Travel Agent. You can now fast travel while over encumbered at an increased cost. That is an amazing change. I was actually watching a stream on this, and it is very, very expensive to fast travel while you're over encumbered. So wouldn't be something I'm doing all the time, but definitely is something that is going to be very, very helpful when you want to do that. Next up, okay, Dodgy, rank 1, evade now cost AP and no longer has a cooldown, and then increase that from 1 to 2. Okay, nothing crazy there. And then yeah, 2 and 3 is gone. Similar theme to everything else. Adrenaline no longer has a cap for damage. It seems like you can just infinitely stack extra 10% damage for each kill, and the duration will refresh. So now I think actually fighting the Scorch during the Scorch Beast Queen is going to make a big difference. I mean, if you can take out like 10 enemies and get an extra 100% damage, Adrenaline might be worth running now, especially because it's only going to be one rank. Like five ranks for Adrenaline was way too much to ask for, considering how many good perks are in the agility tree already. So this is a welcome change here. Now the science perk cards, this is also getting a pretty big buff in my opinion. They're changing how they work essentially by, each of the science cards are going to change how much elemental damage you do. But the regular science card now only has one rank, but it costs 2 points, but it's going to increase your energy damage based on your intelligence. And especially if you're playing Bloodied and you have unyielding armor on, you can get your intelligence pretty high. So I think we're going to see 40+% buff to energy damage if you play your cards right. So huge increase here for laser rifles. I think this will apply to Gatling lasers and Gatling plasmas as well. So yeah, this is going to be a really strong perk card actually. Science Expert is going to increase your fire damage based on intelligence, and Science Master is going to increase your cryo damage based on your intelligence. So I think the cold shoulder specifically from this change is going to be insanely powerful now. It already was probably one of, if not the most powerful shotguns in the game. Most things don't have significant cryo resistance. So if you're buffing the cryo damage on this, like 40-50% depending on your intelligence, yeah, the cold shoulder is going to be busted. Another awesome change that is coming is that they are going to essentially be removing the requirement to have crafting perks equipped on your build to be able to craft stuff. So essentially, makeshift warrior, gunsmith, that sort of stuff is mostly just going to be for durability reasons now, and you won't need to equip it to actually craft or modify things. So huge welcome change there. Yep. But I would say the next major thing here is going to be the Rifleman and the Commando perk changes. So Rifleman now is going to, I guess, increase your range damage to far enemies. So I don't know what that necessarily means. Like, is that just going to increase the range or increase the range before damage starts falling off? Or is this just adding 20% range damage? And to my understanding, this doesn't specify rifles or commando weapons, so I think this is going to be for everything. So this is also kind of a buff to heavy weapons as well, I think, at least. Rifleman Expert here, some of these are just completely changing the way it works, but scoped weapons have 50% more range when aiming. That's just one rank card now, and it costs 2, I think. Yeah. Rifleman Master, deal 25% weak spot damage when aiming scoped weapon. So yeah, this is going to be, and again, that's not even for rifles, or I think these are going to apply to every weapon type. So I guess if you're a heavy gunner that doesn't use VATS, I mean, this is going to be a great change for you for sure. Sniper, nothing really notable there. I feel like nobody actually uses that. Nothing really crazy there. All right, Commando, 25% 25 through 75% range damage when targeting the torso. So my question is going to be, if you have rank 3 of Commando active, is that going to net more damage than targeting weak spots? Because I don't know if this is multiplicative or additive. It's probably the one that helps less. That's what it always is. But yeah, I wonder if how much difference is there going to be between targeting weak spot and targeting torso if you have rank 3 Commando active. And this is kind of I think somewhat of a nerf to Commando weapons if they're not going to increase the base weapon damage, similar that they did to the pistols, where they just essentially calculated how much damage each weapon would be doing if they had all the gorilla or gunslinger perks equipped, and they just added that on to the weapon. I hope they would do a similar approach for Commando weapons, considering heavy weapons are just so far ahead of everything else for ranged weapons right now that this kind of lengthens that gap even more. But yeah, now Commando Expert movement speed bonus is now applied to your reload speed. So I think if you're running Speed Demon, that will essentially be able to, you'll be able to get some extra reload speed just from having Speed Demon on, which already increases reload speed. So I think this could be a good perk, and I feel like it would lessen the need to run Ground Pounder, at least if you have that mutation equipped. Commando Master. Weapon damage is increased by AP cost. So this is definitely going to be a good buff to single shot weapons that typically have higher AP costs. I'm specifically thinking about something like the Gauss rifle or Gauss shotgun, and also the Enclave plasma weapons and just energy weapons in general that kind of typically have a little bit higher AP costs, especially the Enclave plasma flamer. I believe that's capped at 30 AP per shot. So if we're gonna get extra damage out of that, at least, I think that's gonna be a huge help. So kind of a little buff here to the Enclave plasma flamer, in addition to the science, changes, and then this AP damage change here. I think that's gonna make the Enclave plasma weapons a lot better. But I guess we'll see, because they're also removing the damage, the direct damage buffs from Commando. So I just don't know how this is all gonna play out here. But yeah, Ground Pounder, not too much changed here. Again, like I said, I feel like the need to run Ground Pounder will be less now, considering that you can just get extra additional reload speed from Speed Demon. The important change here, though, is that Ground Pounder works on all small guns now, not just rifles, so that is a good change. I mean, between the various categories of perks, there's multiple things that affect reload speed now, so I wonder if you stack everything, just like how fast is the reload gonna look? Like, are we talking about like COD Zombies speed cola reload speed, or what is that gonna look like? I'll definitely have to test that in a video to see what it looks like, especially with like the single action revolver. I wonder how fast you can get that reload down to. Down to skeet shooter here. Small guns have improved accuracy and spread. Oh, okay, so that's cool. That works on everything now. Still don't really like, that's still, I feel like, mostly a manual aiming card. It doesn't really affect you, I don't think, if you're just using VATS, which I think most people are. Shotgunner, 25% range damage to crippled targets. Okay, that's not nothing, especially the Queen. And with the way that limb damage works now, I think crippling a boss enemy to utilize the Shotgunner perk is actually going to be huge here. I know most people already try to cripple the Scorchbeast Queen's wing so it can't fly away, but since that's the case, it's just going to take extra damage now, 75% extra range damage. So yeah, the Scorchbeast Queen is going to be dying a lot faster. Shotgunner Expert, weapons that fire 3 or more projectiles gain 30% range. Okay, that's interesting. Shotgunner Master, each projectile your weapon fires increases your damage against crippled targets by 10. Okay, so that's, again, this is going to be like how much. So then the question now as well is how much more is it going to be worth it now to run 50 extra limb damage as a legendary effect? I think that's going to be a little bit more of a valuable perk, legendary effect now, because that you can cripple an enemy pretty quickly. I mean, each projectile your weapon fires, your damage against increases. So I mean, for shotguns, we're talking about 80% extra damage, 90% damage if you're running 2-shot on it, which we're going to get to in a minute. 2-shot's getting a pretty significant buff as well. Yeah, a lot of changes here. A lot of questions kind of asking myself now. Scatter shot, 20% of all damage dealt to a limb is applied to all limbs on your target. Okay. That's, man, they're really just, this is like an update of all just limb damage stuff here. All right, moving target. Nothing crazy there. Goat legs, nothing crazy there. Blood sacrifice. Okay, I believe this is a legendary perk card. Using AP and VATS now consumes HP instead at 150% more cost. So that's okay. I guess for ghouls that's something you could potentially do, because you can get your health points to some pretty ridiculous numbers, but I almost wonder, like, is that, I guess that this kind of directly opens up the ability for controller players to gain AP back by spamming the D-pad now, though, because if VATS is using, okay, this is actually a huge change, because if you think about how fast super stim packs heal you, if you're spamming that, if a super stim pack is active when you're using VATS, I mean, that's essentially going to be like having conductors and rejuvenators active at the same time, maybe even more than that, just given how fast stim packs can heal you. So I think this is actually going to be more of a human character card than a ghoul character. In practice, people will probably try to use it as a ghoul character build. But yeah, I think this is actually going to be very interesting the way this plays out. But legendary mods here. Okay, Nocturnal, new effects, weapon, 25% damage while cloaked. And armor gets extra damage resistance. Okay. Bloodied. This is a huge change here. Increased peak damage bonus from 95% to 130%. So my question here is, will the removal essentially of straight up damage percentage increases to commando weapons be offset by this bloodied, or like is it going to net out to the same level of strength? It's kind of hard to say. But Junkies does see now Junkies is, now this I think is where it's at, because you don't have to be low health. You can get this as a ghoul as well pretty easily. And I guess it's still just like, I mean, is Junkies going to be better than Furious though? I still feel like Furious probably still gonna just be better than everything. I guess we'll see. Okay, Resilient now increases all resistance when by 5. Okay, that's a pretty big change, because being able to have 500 poison resist during the Ultrasight Terror fight is very, very significant. Or also being able to have 500 additional energy resist fighting the Eno 6 Guardian. This is actually a pretty interesting change here. 2-shot increased damage buff from 25% to 75%. So launchers and explosive weapons definitely just got a decent buff from that. Again, though, I still think Furious is probably still going to be the best first star. We'll see, though. Stalker's new effect now increases sneak attack damage by 100%. Okay, so this is interesting, because sneak damage multipliers are kind of a weird calculation. I don't know exactly how that works, and I don't know directly how Stalkers is going to kind of factor into that equation, but Stalkers might actually be a viable option now, especially for you stealth commando or stealth rifleman builds. I guess we'll see how that plays out, but I like this change. Mutants increased from 25 to 50%. That's a good change there. Gourmands 24 to 40% extra damage. Good change there. Bats optimized increased the bonus from 25 to 35%. Okay, so that is a pretty significant change. I think this will possibly change what 4th star people run on their power armor or their armor now. So if you don't need to run Rangers, or I guess if this reduces AP costs enough to the point where you don't want to run Rangers and you don't need to run Rejuvenators, you know, that this may unlock some new combinations that people want to run. Hitman's effect, 25% weak spot damage while aiming. Okay. Instigating, plus 50% damage against targets above 60% health. So this is essentially like the opposite of what Executioners is. Not sure if I fully like that change or not, but I guess Stalkers is kind of essentially replacing how Instigating is now, because most people that run Instigating run it on a sneak build. So I guess you could run Stalkers instead now. Juggernaut now scales based on your HP directly, not a percentage. Increased the cap to 100% damage at 1,000. Okay, so you can get That's actually a pretty big change too, especially for ghouls. You can get 100% bonus damage at 1000 HP. So this is essentially having almost what Bloody's damage is while being insanely tanky. So that is a huge change. Pinpointers fixed the head being incorrectly counted as an appendage, and the damage is now additive. Yeah. RIP pinpointers, that is nerfed into the ground. There's pretty much no reason to run pinpointers now, unfortunately. The best is probably going to be polished, as you can get 60% damage when a weapon is at 200% condition. So, or is it 100% or 2%? I don't know, but yeah. Yeah, I think polished is going to be probably the best one now for the 4th star. Mutations. Adrenal reaction now grants plus 5% damage per kill, 6.25% with strange numbers. So question is going to be what is the cooldown / timer on that? Like I doubt it's infinite. Like, are you going to have plus 37,000% damage in 2 months when you've killed a bunch of enemies? I don't think so. So I would need some clarification on what the cooldown is, how long that 5% damage lasts, what the reset timer is. Like, is it going to work essentially just how adrenaline works? I don't know, because depending on how this functions, this could be a slight nerf to Bloodied. Yes, the Bloodied weapon effect has a higher increased peak damage number, but you're also losing the plus, like, whatever extra damage percentage you got from what adrenal reaction is now. So we'll have to see how that plays out. Okay, they reclassified a few of the weapons to be in different categories, added a setting to change quick heal priority, and reduced fast travel costs by 25%. Okay, those are good changes. My one ask, if anybody from Bethesda is watching, please, 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 please let controller players bind Toxic Goo to the D-pad. Or have something in the healing priority where when you're over 100% health, the D-pad will use Toxic Goo, and when you're under 100% health, the D-pad will use stim packs. The controller players really, really, really are due for a quick bind button. So we can spam coffee, we can spam Toxic Goo, you know, whatever it is we need to spam. PC players can bind anything to their keyboard. So I think having the ability to do so as a controller player, whether that be from rebinding how buttons work in the settings, or at the very least by having a setting specifically for Toxic Goo for ghouls, that would be very, very helpful. So please, please, please add that. Just a little bit of a change on how bulk items pick up. Okay, nothing too crazy there. Yep, and then just as always, if you have Fallout 76 on Steam, you can participate in the PTS. So if any of you do, I highly recommend you go give that a try. That's gonna do it for going over the patch notes, though. Ton of huge changes here. I think these are mostly good changes, and I'm definitely excited to see what this is going to be like when it hits the live server. If you are still watching at this point, thank you very much. Hit that sub button to see future videos, and I'll see you in the next one.